Thank you, Sir Christopher. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair on behalf of my SNP colleagues and indeed my constituents. I want to extend solidarity from Clydeside to Merseyside on this issue, because I do support public inquiry for the Cammell Laird 37. And I'm going to start with some of the historical background and parallels between Clydeside and Merseyside, because they are interesting, and then there's a point where they diverge, which I think sums up where we are. Because many people in the Glasgow South West constituency worked in the Upper Clyde shipbuilders in the early 1970s. They were proud of their work, and the term Clyde built defined their international reputation for quality. In June 1971, Upper Clyde shipbuilders went into receivership. It was described as being loss-making, even though the yards had a full order book with a profit being forecast in 1972. The move to receivership was political, not economic. The Heath government had announced a policy that refused further state support for what they called lame-duck industries. That refusal led to a crisis of confidence among UCS creditors. That crisis resulted in severe cash flow problems for the company, and the company was then forced to enter liquidation. Now, none of that needed to happen, and the trade unions knew it, and the shipyard workers knew it. And under the leadership of Jimmy Reid and Jimmy Airlie, they decided to conduct the now famous UCN work-in to complete the orders already in place. They were joined in marches by 80,000 people, and the world watched on with wonder at this demonstration of popular support for the workers of Scotland. The then Conservative government in 1972 had to relent to the demands of the workers and restructured the yards around two companies. So what is the relevance of the UCS experience to today's debate on Cammell Laird? Well, the first part of each experience is similar. Shipyard workers were concerned about the possible closure of their yards and consequent mass unemployment with few alternatives for future livelihoods. Politically motivated decisions were made to proceed with closure, and the workforce responded with industrial action, including occupation. But sadly, that's where the stories of each begin to seriously diverge, because it was Margaret Thatcher was even more ruthless than Ted Heath. She had few qualms about unleashing the powers of the state and its appendages to undermine the human rights of workers. The use of the police to break the miners' strike the same year as the Cammell Laird action showed a consistency of contempt for ordinary working people. Throw them on the scrap heap, they're no longer needed by the government. Now, some would argue, Sir Christopher, and it's unfortunate that we didn't have a Conservative backbench member to perhaps articulate this position, but maybe they were on strike, I don't know. But some would argue that the planned closure of Cammell Laird was legitimate, that it was a political decision by a democratically elected government. But that's why I don't think we should discuss that, that decision to close. I think we need to concentrate on the means used to implement government decisions. The debate here today is not simply about political decision-making regarding industrial closures. It's about the treatment of workers and the denial of their human rights, and especially about the subsequent cover-ups by those in authority then and now. It's about the campaign to secure justice for the 37 Cammell Laird workers who were jailed after taking part in an official industrial dispute. And Sir Christopher, I welcome and endorse the position advocated by the Labour Party that if they're to win the next election, they would release documents held by the government relating to Cammell Laird prosecutions and carry out a review into the jailing of striking workers. But the issue is not just about the integrity of political parties and governments, it's also about the credibility of the United Kingdom itself, which has long claimed to be a beacon of human rights. Well, as far as workers' rights are concerned, that beacon dimmed in 1984, and in other debates, as we've seen in the last few weeks, we may discuss whether it's dimming even still. Through the snippets of information currently available to us, we believe that key shop stewards were victimised during the redundancy process. And apparently, Michael Heseltine boasted about that by referring to, and I quote, "step change in attitude and motivation arising within the new balance of the workforce following selective compulsory redundancies." Having continued their occupation of two new vessels, 37 workers were ordered to abandon that occupation to attend a court hearing and were then threatened with contempt of court. That was a novel form of attempted strike breaking by the state escalating into the notorious imprisonment of those 37 men. The climax of it all for the 37 was a subsequent blacklisting and financial hardship. These are not the hallmarks of some beacon of workers' rights and industrial harmony. They look much more like what we see in oppressive regimes. The use of false imprisonment of dissenters and other human rights violations, which we would all condemn in other countries as being part of a brutal abuse of power. We've seen the abuse of power closer to home, as in Northern Ireland, and we've had the courage to investigate it. We must do that for the Cammell Laird 37. Now, it was good in April 2017 when the then Government Justice Minister Philip Lee agreed to look into the case if re-elected in the forthcoming June election. But we're still waiting, and perhaps the Minister here today can tell us what actions it's taken since April 2017 to look into this specific case. Almost no records that relate to the policing of the dispute, British shipbuilders' handling of industrial relations, or the government's response have been published, and it's now time for that to happen. Following Subject Access and Freedom of Information Act requests, we've heard the claims from numerous government departments that they do not hold unpublished papers. We've heard the cop-out in 2010 from the Metropolitan Police, who refused a subject access request from one of the striking workers and responded by saying that the Met neither confirms nor denies that it holds the information you requested. Internationally, we've heard the opinion of the European Parliament's Committee on Pensions, as other members have said, and it's worth quoting that, Sir Christopher, in closing. There have been consistent attempts since 1984 to obtain information answers justice regarding the contravention of basic human rights of the people involved under established European and international laws, treaties and conventions. Yet their stated rights of respect for the principles of liberty, democracy, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms under the rule of law under Article 6 of the Treaty of the European Union have been denied. Sir Christopher, in closing, that beacon of human rights is only barely flickering and the world sees it. Let's have that justice for the Cammell Laird 37.